Welcome to the webinar titled From Invasive to Innovate. My name is Marloes Reining and I'm going to be your facilitator for today. Who are we? We are from the Regenerative Collaborative. It's a non-profit organization focused on transforming our built environment into a regenerative one. We promote strategies and approaches that bring regenerative design and construction to life. We work collectively to inspire, educate, create awareness, and contextualize regenerative built environment approaches to the South African context. We make an effort to showcase local projects, local people, and local companies that are aligned with our goal, which is creating a regenerative future. How do we do that? We do that through these webinars, and if you've missed one of them, all our webinars that were recorded in the past 3 years are uploaded on YouTube. So go to our YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button. That really helps us also with finding sponsorships for our webinars. Other ways to follow us via Eventbrite, our registration platform, LinkedIn and YouTube. And we would be really, really happy if you like our posts and other social media entities. We're always looking out for volunteers. So if you have some spare time, you made some good commitments for 2025 that you want to do more social things and you want to be more active on this front. So we can always use your help on the admin and the social media side. So, or if you want to find sponsorship or whatever you want to do, we can use your help. So let us know and join our team. But today we have exciting speakers and exciting projects. We're talking about removing invasive species to create innovative materials, building materials, and other stuff. And we're very excited to have a sponsor today, which is Regenerative SPACE, NPC and Solutions. And the Regenerative SPACE is a non-profit organization as well. So I'm very happy that they, despite being a non-profit, still want to sponsor us. A non-profit organization dedicated to restoring the environment and benefiting communities by developing localized green economies. Their mission is to build resilience at the local level by addressing biodiversity loss and fostering sustainable practices, and at the same time building greater community resilience. One of their flagship projects is the Green Economy Program, located at the Agulhas Plain in the Overberg region in the Western Cape. This program focuses on creating sustainable solutions that integrate environmental restoration with community development. By crafting localized green economies, Regenerative SPACE aims to unleash the potential for sustainable development, demonstrating that such effort can be both impactful and forward-thinking. Regenerative SPACE emphasizes the importance of innovative and ambitious ideas, encouraging collaboration and support to make these initiatives successful. They invite individuals and organizations to join them in taking actions to invest in the environment and local communities. And today we have both Jan and Carla from the Regenerative SPACE as speakers, and they will talk a lot more about the work they will be doing in just a minute. So thank you again, super, for your sponsorship. Carla, you wanted to add something to what I said?
Marloes, no, thank you. I'm happy with what you said. It sounds very cool when you say it.
No, thanks. Moving on to the speakers, we have Jan Vingerhoets, and he is the co-founder of Regenerative SPACE. He brings a unique blend of business acumen and hands-on environmental expertise. His career spans diverse industries, from running drilling data analysis units on oil rigs to working as an application programmer in San Francisco. And on top of that, founding a successful biometrics company when he returned to South Africa. He later served as a CEO of a waste-to-energy company, deepening his commitment to sustainability. Today, and this is the exciting part, Jan lives entirely off the grid with his wife and son on a small holding where they farm organically, cultivate heirloom seeds, and reside in a self-built straw bale home. As an artist, he transforms waste into functional arts, embodying the principles of regeneration in both his work and lifestyle. All right. Sounds good. Then we have our second speaker is Carla Vingerhoets. She's also the founder of Regenerative SPACE, bringing decades of experience in the socio-economic development and sustainability. She spent years working at national and provincial government level before leading a successful consultancy focused on gender in development over 20 years. This work has deepened her understanding of the intricate connection between human well-being and the natural environment. Since 2019, Carla has dedicated her efforts to the green economy with a particular focus on the Overberg region in the Western Cape. Her vision for the regenerative space is to facilitate alternative, sustainable ways of living that move away from consumerism, foster innovative solutions to shared development challenges, and create opportunities for more authentic and nature-inclusive lifestyles. And then our last speaker will be Christopher Maurer. He's the founder and principal architect of Red House Studio and MyCohab, both dedicated to pushing the boundaries of sustainable design and environmental justice. Based in Cleveland, Ohio, he has led architectural projects across North America, Europe, and Africa, integrating cutting-edge science with deep commitment to ecological and social responsibility. Through Red House Studio, Chris has developed biofabrication solutions in collaboration with NASA, MIT, and other institutions, exploring innovative approaches to regenerative architecture. As one of the driving forces behind MyCohab, he is pioneering the use of mycelium technology to address food security, create sustainable building materials, generate jobs, and foster a carbon-negative ecosystem. His work redefines how architecture can contribute to a more just and sustainable future. So after reading this out, I think we can all agree that we have three super people in the room, and I'm really looking forward to hearing their presentations.
Okay, Marloes, thank you very much for the introduction. What I would like to do is to start off by sharing with you a video that contextualizes where it is that we're working and what it is that we are trying to deal with. And after that, I will talk a little bit more about our model and approach before handing over to Jan, who will focus more on the ground level aspects. So here with a contextual video.
We have two enormous problems in our neck of the woods: a massive environmental degradation and climate change effects, and the fourth highest unemployment in the world, 33% nationally. This is clearly a problem that needs urgent solution, now, today. Regenerative Space is all about crafting a localized green economy focused on nature-based enterprises across a variety of themes, with alien biomass beneficiation being one of these.
Those of us that live in this part of the world are privileged to live in a global hotspot, but with that comes a whole lot of responsibility. The Cape Floral Kingdom is one of the smallest floral kingdoms in the world and has one of the greatest biodiversities. It is under threat, and the most significant of which is the alien invasive plants. Unfortunately, the fynbos being a treeless system has rendered it vulnerable to invasion, and simply by displacing a whole lot of the species that are in the system, aliens have a huge impact on its natural functioning.
When we got here, we underestimated what we were facing. You listen, you hear the water, you hear animals, you hear birds, like you did there, you hear frogs, laughing, dead. Still higher. See, this is actually, hello, stream is over there. This is where the stream is supposed to be. This stream bank is going, is collapsing. And then this water, all of this soil will be gone. Water will go straight. This meandering arm is gone. You can already see rock bottom. So with the indigenous forest, what we have seen, it brings the floor of the stream up, and here it brings it down, down, and down. You cannot restore that land. What we're looking at is 5 things: gum from Australia, pine from Cyprus, Acacia longifolia from Australia, Hakea from Australia, and Australian myrtle 5. Just here we already have about 50 species, because quite a few of the bulb species are in the soil. You only see them after a fire.
Fire is the most significant driver in the system, and these plants and animals have evolved over millions of years with hot, dry summers and intense fires during those periods. But the densities of the aliens change the intensity of fire and how much material is available for burning.
Both aliens and fynbos are fire prone and are used to fire, so they like the fire, they love the fire. But the problem is the water fires. Fynbos doesn't love the water fire. The seeds actually burn dead. And that's what negatively affects the fynbos species.
Many people think that it's a solution to get rid of your aliens by just burning it. But the trick is you have to follow up. And that follow up is the most expensive part of the, not the burn, not the water it's stealing from you. It's not the risk it threatens you. It's the fact that if you do not follow up, it comes back 3, 4, 5 times more, and that is expensive.
But it's going to be really interesting to see over time what the effect of the clearings had on the water table too. I'm Ross Kettles. I'm the operations manager for Neverjaar's Wetland Special Management Area. And depending on which source and depending on the season, they're either the biggest or the second biggest freshwater wetlands in the country. So it's got tremendous value in terms of biodiversity. And these wetlands feed aquifers, which feed all the villages in the area. Well, there'd been generation after generation of aliens here, mainly Port Jacksons. And the effects that we'd seen, with this being a wetland, it definitely impacted on the water levels, disrupted water flow. The estimations that vary greatly, but it's estimated that one wattle tree will drink upwards of 200-300 litres of water per day. The bulk of the work that we do on a day-to-day basis is actually alien clearing. Because it's in a wetland, there are lots of channels which makes getting in very difficult, and then you've got to extract the wood, and then you've got to get rid of the wood.
This type of work don't stop. It's continuously. You have to do it. You have to do initials now, and you have to follow up in 6 months' time, depending on the weather conditions. It has to be done. There's no other way. For me, there's a regular income every fortnight. So your people don't have to struggle of having food to come to work, and they're more happy.
But if funding wasn't a problem, we could employ 500, 1,000 people here for the next couple of decades, I'm guessing. And we're hoping that those opportunities, should they ever evolve, would create other opportunities, because then we're going to be sitting with biomass that we could do something with.
Invasive vegetation to me.
So it is then within this context that what we are trying to do is to develop a model for doing invasive alien clearing differently, so to speak. And I will share with you some ideas about that, as will Jan. So the model that we're looking at is basically to say, if this is the context where invasive alien clearing takes place, how do you do alien clearing and follow up and rehabilitation that it is actually financially viable, or at least financially self-sustaining. As many of you are probably aware, most of alien clearing that takes place, and it's been going on for decades, is either funded by government or it's funded by some form of donor funding. Now, Philly, in the last couple of months, maybe more than that, years, there's been a lot of cutback from government funding side, which means that organizations working with alien clearing gets into a situation where it stops start work. People are not sure of renewal of contracts, which obviously have knock-on effects for efficacy and for creating permanent employment. So invariably, people are more dependent on government and donor funding than I think what it should ideally be. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, what we asking questions about is how do we do this? How do we do alien clearing and follow up on rehabilitation while not exploiting the environment or people? In other words, often when we see logging companies operating in the Overberg, which is the area where we work, what they do and how they do it is very often associated with bringing in heavy machinery, and the negative impact on the environment is quite substantial. Because taking out clearing of, say, for example, pine trees, it's not in a plantation setup where there's neat roads and easy access and level contours and that kind of thing, but it is an infestation. So regenerative space was really started with saying to ourselves, is it possible to develop a model that can bring these two aspects closer together, doing the work but without the exploitation? The way in which we work, our approach is very much a process, a development process that is an iterative process. We try to play a role of initiation and to act as a catalyst. And in saying that, I think what we try to do is to ask difficult questions, to ask the sometimes perhaps unpopular questions about how things are done. We don't think that it is a good idea to just follow the traditional way of doing things. In playing that role, it also means that we, in some way, we incubate ideas that's not been out there before, or out there necessarily long enough for people to have experimented with. So I think in some way we position ourselves to be in a position where we can do that, that obviously then leads to innovation. And I think part of the innovation is not only innovation in terms of how clearing is done, it's actually not about that, because there's been many other organizations around who's doing alien clearing for much longer. The innovation that we bring to the table is around the business model or the financial model for trying to do it differently. And then finally, we try to integrate to the extent that it's possible with collaborators and people working around us. So our approach is definitely not to nullify the expertise and the experience of other organizations doing invasive alien clearing. To the contrary, I think that there's a lot that we've learned and that we continue to learn from them. But what we do bring to the table is that we are firmly of the opinion that our model that we're developing is hopefully going to put the industry, so to speak, in a position where we can come up with sizable solutions to a problem. In other words, we're trying to get to a point where we can say the size of the solution is matching the size of the problem. And I think up until that point, if we can't do that, then we are probably going to continue getting the same kind of answers. So right now, our hypothesis for trying to see if this alien clearing and beneficiation process could be financially feasible is really focused on three things. The first is to say that alien clearing can't take place in the absence of doing something with the biomass. If you have the biomass must be utilized in some way. Preferably, we need to get to a point where there's integrated clearing, where we use multiple skilled teams that can go in once, remove aliens, do chipping, leave behind infield products like poles, for example, that can be picked up and move on. The second thing that conclusion really that we came to over the last 18 months is that we need various commercial products. Any enterprise really who's trying to do this can't do it with one single product. The nature of the work is such that because it is not a plantation setup, one clean, neat product is not possible. In order for financial viability to be there, various commercial products are necessary, and Jan is going to touch on that just now. Then lastly, right now we at the point rather, where we think that the third missing thing that we need to get in place is to say that we need some kind of key process that requires big volumes of indiscriminate biomass. In other words, a big thing that uses a lot of invasive alien biomass that can produce something, and it doesn't matter, it's not species specific, it doesn't matter what you feed into it, but it's going to process it and it's going to generate, for example, electricity. What I would like to do is I'm going to hand over to Jan. He's going to unpack all of this a little bit further. And before I carry on, I would like to make mention of two things. A lot of the work that we do, especially in testing and redesigning and pivoting, changing our thinking, developing that model, is thanks to the grant funding of two very big and supportive donors. The Oak Foundation has been in our corner from just about the start of Regenerative SPACE, and also the Lewis Foundation. And without them, it would not have been possible for us to be where we are right now in terms of the hypothesis and model that we work with. So Jan, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I think the scale of this is probably the most difficult thing to convey, short of I think you got some impression from the video from comments that Ross from Nivias mentioned. We're talking about something that really is a scale problem. And at the same time, we've got the scale problem of the unemployment. So as Carla said, you know, to try and bring these two together is the reason behind all of this. And not to put too fine a point on it, I mean, I think we're essentially faced with an existential crisis that's moving so slowly. You know, it's not like an earthquake or an instantaneous wildfire. It's more like the frog in the pot, the apocryphal story of the frog in the pot, where things happen slowly and it's not right in your back door, and you kind of don't really see the changes happening. But the truth is, it actually is something that needs to be dealt with at scale and rapidly. One thing we've been looking at is first of all how the work gets done. A lot of the received wisdom is self-defeating. In other words, a lot of the work has been done the same way because the work has been done the same way. And what we're trying to bring to this is, with our diverse backgrounds and with some great advisors and mentors that we have, to question every aspect of what happens, both work-wise in the field, as well as what could potentially be a product. And it's obviously we've made mistakes, and I think the mistakes largely have been, in one sense, our initial naivety, long since gone, and obviously the naivety about the scale of it. There's something very grounding about realizing exactly how big an area we're talking about and how much biomass there is. On an aside, if anybody wants to see that scale, you're welcome to come to our sawmill and see how much material builds up in a very short time. So this is definitely it's been a laboratory. Initially it was hypothesis. I think our hypothesis has started to change into theory, but it has been at the cost of questioning perhaps some, I want to say experts, let's just say the received wisdom. And I want to say it's not for lack of their enthusiasm, but for probably, forgive the pun, but one tends to not see the wood for the trees if you're in the environment and you've been doing it for a long time, and this is such a huge problem and you're working with lack of funds. So what happens at the moment, team goes into the field. First of all, the survey is done. We have agreements with landowners on how the work will get done. It gets done in the Napier Mountain Conservancy, which is our pilot project, at no cost to the landowner, but we get to use the biomass. The biomass we now view as a resource, which has not been the way people view it generally, apart from the people who've come in and cherry-picked a pole here and a bush there, but left everything else. So here you can see the effects of clearing and windrowing. And it's not a simple case of just chopping something down and leaving it, because ultimately you want to use the biomass in some fashion. So the material that is viable can be used for direct products, gets removed from the field, and that which we'll process later gets taken to the depot or to a processing area. And these options vary. In a lot of ways, we've had to kind of, well, not kind of, we've had to bring imagination to this, because I think that's one of the things that has been lacking. It's very easy to say, well, let's just chop a tree down and sell poles. Well, is there, if you're looking at it from a business perspective, to generate revenue in order to fund all this work that has to happen, what is it that actually makes financial sense? So you have to look at effectively the clearing operation, which has been traditionally a NGO, non-profit, let's see how we can get funds in from wherever we can, to what we're trying to create is an environment that says, well, if we're clearing this biomass, what can we do with every single species that there is of every single type? In other words, a sapling, a tree, a log. Planks are an obvious route, but you have to be able to balance your time spent with the revenue earned to pay for this very expensive operation. So at this stage, we've got a few parallel product lines happening. Some have been effective, some not. Again, a lot of the so-called effective ones or not effective ones have been as a consequence of the received wisdom. So we're questioning each aspect of it, and we're inviting people to come up with ideas for biomass, because the more multiple product streams we can get out of a single clearing operation, the more viable the whole enterprise becomes. So what we've got at the moment is a number of parallel operations. The pallets, we've got a sawmill. We're producing compost, which we plan to certify organically. That derives from the waste from the production of pallets. Shavings will come from milling, producing timber. And the further waste that can't be used for any of those things will be compressed into extruded logs, heating logs. So ultimately the idea is that there will be zero waste. And because we've got this enormous biomass volume, we've also engaged with Earth Science Africa, a company that specializes in carbon project financing. And they don't do the financing themselves. They do the feasibility studies, and they do all the hard work that goes into making such an operation, check that such an operation can become viable. So we've partnered with them. We're working on putting in a biochar kiln, a certified biochar kiln, which will produce biochar, which will add carbon, a means of sequestering carbon and putting carbon into, in our area, a very, very carbon sparse environment. Then there's the carbon offtake, or the carbon credit offtake will pay for the work to be done. This is one means of upscaling to different geographic nodes, because what we want to do is replicate this model, adapting it for each environment, given the scale of the project. One of the essential things, of course, is to be able to find offtake partners for all the different products that we're finding. And given the fact that the one advantage of the biochar is that it's sort of agnostic in a sense, because it doesn't matter what type of wood goes into the biochar kiln, as long as it's prepared the right way, it's grist for the mill. But the challenge does come in as we're moving through the landscape. Different species, different sizes, different ages, different topography informs how much biomass and what comes out of the field. So you have to be very agile to be able to adapt this. And this is adaptive. I think this is the key knowledge that we have, is this is not couched around a single product. It's about being able to adapt to the different species to address different product streams. And so the idea is that as we grow the revenue viability, the financial viability of the for-profit side of the company, which is solutions, we work in partnership, we are able to put money back into the further rehabilitation and further clearing. That very expensive follow-up work that was mentioned by Louise from FBA is exactly the problem. You often see vast numbers of aliens spring up where the follow-up simply hasn't been done. And actually, you've wasted all the money that went into in the beginning, and it becomes complete lost cause, and far worse off than it was before. So the idea is that it is a win-win solution for people and the environment. What can we do to solve this environment crisis long term, so that it actually has longevity, has traction, and we have a result? And at the same time, with all these people being essentially seasonally employed before, how do we make sure they have meaningful long-term employment that pays them more than a living wage, makes it possible to actually increase their living standards substantively? So it's the quintessential social environmentally responsible business. It's everything that any supporting company, any off-taker could happily hang a shingle on and say, this is truly a sustainable and eco-friendly solution, creating resilience for us for the nation across the board. So I hope I didn't ramble too much through all of that. We've kind of hit on the high points. I'm sure there'll be questions. I wanted to quickly just say how it pertains to the building industries. Of course, we're interested in the whole low impact building material side of things. So we're inviting people to come forward and come with ideas around perhaps micro houses or whatever. So I hope that has covered everything we needed to at this stage. Carla, did I leave any holes?
No.
Okay, good.
Well, we'll find out at 5 o'clock if they start asking you questions.
I'm just going to make it up then. So.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so we're going to move on to the second speaker. Chris, do you want to? There you are. He's in America in a very early time zone. So thank you for being here on such an early morning. And we're looking forward to hear your story.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'll pull up my slideshow and start to talk about an interesting topic today called mycotexture. We're defining mycotexture as using fungi to shape the built environment. And what you're looking at in the background there as this starts to animate are fungal mycelium. So these are basically the root-like branching hyphae of fungal organisms, and most of the time we think of fungi as producing mushrooms, but that's not always the case. But generally with the hyphae forming fungi, we do get mushrooms. And so there are capabilities of actually making food and buildings at the same time using mycotextural processes, and a project that we did in Namibia is the one that I'm going to focus on today. But we've developed several forms of biotechnology operations for mycotexture that are for, the work we did in Africa was with MIT, and we're developing some materials in Cleveland that are about remediation of the built environment. And we're developing some materials for NASA currently to actually grow buildings off planet. So yes, we got a great introduction to the problem of bush in Southern Africa, but I also want to talk about the problems we deal with in the built environment and architecture generally. I'm an architect, and these are some of the things that I struggle with. The world's building stock will double by 2060. So between 2020 and 2060, imagine every building on the planet today. And then imagine doubling that. So every building that's ever been built will also be built in the next 40 years. It's about 2.5 trillion square feet of building. And put in terms of New York cities, that's like adding another New York City every month for the next 40 years to the planet. So it's a lot of building. On top of that, buildings are responsible for 40% of the world's carbon emissions, with concrete, steel, and aluminum alone responsible for 23% of those emissions. 84% of that is due to the raw extraction of materials. So looking for circular resources could have a huge benefit to mitigating the carbon emissions that come from the building processes. And so that's why I want to introduce mycotexture. And as you saw on the first slide, I'm going to be speaking about mycelium, which is the root-like branching hyphae of the fungal organism. Most people think of them as the roots of mushroom when you first get introduced to them, but it's more proper to think of them as the actual organism and the mushroom as the fruit of that organism, the same way that an apple is a fruit of an apple tree. And so if you can take this fungal mycelium and you compare that with any kind of biogenic plant waste that has cellulose, including invasive species of bush and trees, or the byproduct from agricultural processes like straw or bagasse, you give them time and space to grow, you can have both mushrooms and biomanufactured goods in the same process. So it's kind of a doubling of resources. You could take a waste material and convert that into a couple, or as we'll show probably later, many beneficial outcomes from this process. What we're doing in Namibia, as I mentioned, this was a project sponsored by Standard Bank, which is Africa's largest bank that you all are probably familiar with. They funded a group at MIT who hired Red House. And the premise was, can we turn this encroacher bush into both food and materials to develop a more sustainable housing mechanism for the many people in Namibia that are experiencing homelessness or living in informal settlements, and deal with this problem of the encroacher species in Namibia. So the process basically takes the bush, grinds it up into a pulp, and then uses that as the substrate for growing mushrooms. As you see in the second photo there, we developed these large columns that the mycelium grows within, and then mushrooms fruit from the outside of that column. They're easy to harvest. We take that to market. We sell them as a product, and then the byproduct from that is what we're using to make the building materials. So food is food. Food is sacred. We believe that using the food to feed people is the proper thing. And I'm only emphasizing that because a lot of people look at this and they say you're building houses out of mushrooms, and I just want to correct that precept, because we're using the mushrooms as a food to feed people, and it's the byproduct from the cultivation that are put into these presses that we developed in Namibia, pressed into the blocks as you see there at the end, and then they become multifunctional materials. They're structural, insulative, fire resistant, sound attenuating, and as you'll see here in this slide, we used those blocks to build the world's first structural mycelium building. So there's a lot of biofabrication companies throughout the world that are using mycelium for packaging materials, and in some cases building materials that are for insulation, but this is the first time that a mycelium material has ever been used to be the structure of a building. And this was built in Namibia on our site at MyCohab, and we used 12 tons of encroacher bush to create this building. In the process, we grew over 3 tons of mushrooms that went to market to feed people, and the whole process actually was carbon negative to the tune of 12 tons of carbon dioxide. And I'll go through the carbon accounting here in a second as well. Here's another slide that shows the site on which we were working on and the process that goes from bush to buildings with mushrooms in between. Yeah, so here are some of the statistics that I just mentioned. The 12 tons of bush was paired with 100 kilograms of mycelium, 6,000 liters of water, which is, sounds like a lot, but that's actually quite small when it comes to the agricultural process of producing 3 tons of food. Vegetables require much more than that, and of course cattle requires about 100 times that to produce that tonnage of food. And so with those 12 tons of bush, we were able to make 925 myco blocks that went into the construction of this building. There you also see some of the data on the material characteristics. The mass of each block is around 13 kilograms, so it's very similar to a concrete block. These are solid rather than the concrete blocks that are hollow. The compressive strength that we got on the materials there is about 6 megapascals, which is very similar to concrete block as well in Namibia. But just to mention that here in Cleveland or in our at Red House, where we were able to get that all the way up to 26 megapascals, which is very similar to reinforced concrete or cross-laminated timber, which is a new form of building that's pretty exciting to do high-rise construction. So the compressive strength is basically enough to do a 1-story building in Namibia as we have the processes now, but the technology is such that it could be improved upon to do even high-rise construction in the near future. The organic carbon stored in each block is around 6 kilograms. It's about 43% organic carbon in there. And so when you multiply that by a factor to get the carbon dioxide equivalency, you get 20 kilograms. And I'll go through how that was figured in subsequent slides. But this is just to say that once we net out all of the functions of this, including all of the cultivation and manufacturing operations, when we subtract our carbon footprint, it comes back down to 13 kilograms of carbon dioxide storage. So for every ton of material we make, we're actually storing a ton of carbon dioxide. And this went through proper accounting and looked at double counting, as it was mentioned earlier by Jan, is a major problem with carbon accounting, that sometimes people will count things twice, but we were very clear, and we worked with a group at MIT to develop the criteria on that. And then R value, I'm not sure if that's used in Southern Africa, but that's what we use here in the States to talk about the thermal resistance. And for these blocks, we get about an R19, which is what I would need in Cleveland, Ohio, to insulate a building from our very, very cold winters, which we're experiencing right now. This slide is to demonstrate, just in case you don't understand megapascals and don't know what that means, 6 megapascals and 26 megapascals, a very unscientific test that demonstrate the impact resistance of our myco blocks compared to concrete. And so, concrete is famously very heavy and brittle, which is a thing that those are aspects you don't want in your buildings when you're talking about seismic loading or lateral loading, things that include buildings knocking together in earthquakes. What you want is a ductile and lightweight material. And so this is kind of just a demonstration to show that. You'll note that we used a concrete block that was hollow core because that's actually how they're made. That's what's used. But we got some pushback from people that said it wasn't fair because this block was hollow where ours is solid. So we had to repeat the demonstration with a solid concrete block. And suffice it to say, very similar results with the myco block. We get a dent and a crack. With the concrete block, we get a shattering effect that could be potentially catastrophic when it comes to building failure. And this was discussed earlier, but in Namibia, the bush problem is a little bit different, or the species problem is a little different. Whereas there, I believe it's mostly invasive species. In Namibia, they have a problem with encroaching species. So they're indigenous plant life, but they're growing out of control because of unsustainable land management practices. So on the left is the grasslands that you would normally see in Namibia. On the right is what you see when the bush encroachment gets out of control due to changes in wildlife migration patterns, fencing of property, and unsustainable land management for different purposes. But there are about 26 to 30 million hectares of Namibia that are experiencing this out of control encroachment. That's about 30% of the whole country. And the average total wood per hectare is 36,000 kilograms, 36 tons basically. And the harvestable amount would be, roughly 12,000 for each hectare. And if you, multiply that by the millions of hectares, we're talking about 330,000 tons of encroacher bush that would be replaced every year by the natural growth of the bush. So this is a very sustainable resource to be harvested. If we were to extract this, use this for industrial operations, it would not only replace itself, but we would need to continue to extract that to manage the land management. And so I promised I would tell you a little bit about the carbon accounting, and where this comes from is not necessarily, it's not from the fungi that do this carbon sequestration. It's from the plants. So the bush themselves draw down carbon as they grow through photosynthesis, and so they remove the carbon dioxide from the environment, and then that goes into the bush, that it gets converted into a different form of biomass from the fungal digestion. And then as it's those two kingdoms of life are paired together, we say it's the best of both kingdoms, because you get the the strength, the strong parts of the plant material and the strong parts of the fungal material come together to give us the composite material. But to do this accounting, you have to encounter the carbon drawdown, and then you subtract the carbon emissions, and that will give you the net CO2 sequestration. And to understand the carbon that's in the material, you look at the organic carbon, and there's a very simple conversion factor that's 3.67. So for every gram of organic carbon that's in there, that's equal to 3.67 grams of carbon dioxide that was in the environment, that was drawn down, because it pulls that carbon out of it and it releases the oxygen, which is most of the CO2 atom. And of course, oxygen is something that we all appreciate very much. So using just the straw waste in the US alone for building materials would be enough to offset all of the transportation emissions. So there's a huge benefit to taking these biogenic waste materials, things like straw and bagasse from sugarcane farming, putting them into buildings that would store that carbon dioxide long term. There's a huge benefit from that, because you could potentially, instead of letting that re-release into the environment from burning bagasse or the straw just kind of decomposing and re-releasing the CO2, if you lock it away long term, then you can actually have this offset. And this is kind of reiterating what I just said, with 43% organic carbon, when you multiply that by the carbon dioxide conversion factor, then you get the CO2 equivalency. And then this shows the carbon accounting that talks about the different emissions that are accounted for to get us to that 1 ton per ton carbon storage. And it's important to notice here too, we're actually there are many other methods of doing this process that could be more environmentally friendly. For instance, we're using diesel to bake the blocks. If we were using solar photovoltaic systems to create the heat needed to bake the blocks, then we would actually be in a better place as far as carbon storage. So I would say that the ton per ton is actually the bottom limit for the possibilities here. And this is just a slide showing kind of the accounting. From 1 kilogram of carbon, or from encroacher bush, we have the possibility of getting up to 1 kilogram of mushrooms. Now, we're not getting that in reality yet, but due to biological efficiencies, there is the possibility of getting a ton of mushrooms, a ton of building materials, and a ton of carbon storage. and there's no laws of conservation being violated here. It, some of that extra biomass is coming from the air and the water that's put into the mixture here. So, but basically the dry biomass can equate to this many benefits if done properly. And if we were to take only 1% of the 330 million tons that I talked about earlier of the Namibian encroacher bush, we could potentially make enough of these habitats to house the million people or 500,000 people living in informal settlements in Namibia within the first 15 years of doing this. We would be able to produce hundreds of thousands of tons of mushrooms to feed people, and of course store thousands of tons of carbon dioxide in the same process. And when it comes to scaling the technology, this can be done world over. So sub-Saharan Africa, we have the ability to look at invasive species and encroacher species. But here in North America, we have 140 million tons of grain straw that goes to waste every year. All the rice straw in Asia is nearly 1 billion tons of biogenic waste, and things like date palms in the Middle East and bagasse throughout most of the world. A lot of these things are just burned in fields to get rid of it. So that's re-releasing the carbon dioxide into the environment without helping anyone. If you're turning these into fuel pellets and burning them to produce energy, at least you're offsetting the fossil fuel emissions. But just burning in fields tends to release the carbon dioxide without having any beneficial outputs to it. So there's over billions of tons of biogenic waste that go to are burned or just completely go into waste every year throughout the world. So the technology is hugely scalable and can go to just about any continent. And so on that topic of scaling and commercialization, as I mentioned, the project that we had done was funded by Standard Bank, and it was just a demonstration project to show that the possibilities of turning bush into food and housing. I think that the next steps from here, now that we know that it's a possibility and it has the benefits that we're talking about, is to scale the process, and that's where we would actually start to make a dent in carbon emissions and other disadvantage aspects of both the building and agricultural systems. So the buildings are responsible for 40% of all greenhouse gases. As I have already mentioned, agriculture is responsible for 20% of all greenhouse gas emissions. So between the two of them, we have 60% of the world's carbon emissions. That's the majority of carbon emissions for buildings and agriculture. And I just described to you a system that not only provides food and housing, but does it in a carbon negative way. So that we had the possibility of providing both food and buildings, and actually regenerate land and mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. So it could mitigate the climate change due to greenhouse gas emissions. And the way we see the scaling is to take this into developed markets as well as humanitarian markets, but with a concept where we're selling adaptogenic mushroom products to help fund the building processes until that can scale to a point that it becomes lucrative to do the building processes on its own. Getting to the scale of building processes to be lucrative is a very big jump. So it takes a lot of investment. So our path to market strategy here is to first make the money off of the tea products. And here you see a concept for a tea that could be sold in Whole Foods here in the United States, or food lovers in South Africa, to more of a developed market where you would see by purchasing this tea, you're actually helping to build homes. You're supporting land regeneration, you're supporting mitigation of greenhouse gases, and you may be incentivized to buy this if you're not already into adaptogenic mushroom products. But here in the United States, the markets for that are booming, and so we see a possibility of leveraging that to be the path to market to get the mycoterials into the mainstream, and it's scaled such that they can be sustainably commercialized on their own. I've already kind of gone through the slide where we talked about the possibilities throughout the planet. So it can be done just about in any location. In almost every case we're looking at, we're going to be storing carbon dioxide because the materials would go to waste. Otherwise, it would generally either be burned or re-release that carbon dioxide into the environment almost immediately. And there's a lot of benefits to the mushroom products that we're looking at here. So I mentioned in the United States, there's a big push for these adaptogenic products. Reishi mushrooms, turkey tail mushrooms are very popular in and known for their abilities to boost immunity. They're used in supplements for sleep and rest, antioxidants, and they have different adaptogenic products like beta-glucans and triterpenoids that are known for immunity as well as actually brain function. So turkey tail is looked at for something that can actually make you smarter. So who couldn't use more of that? And then the way that we would actually scale the building products would be to move to more of a panelized system that would be useful for prefabricated construction. And so this could be done in multiple markets. We would continue to do the work, I believe, in Namibia throughout humanitarian markets, but the rest of the world, in more developed markets, as well as in Namibia, to do more upscale construction and potentially even prefabricated units for high-rise construction. So that, by panelizing these systems, we make them very fast to construct. Architects love it because it's carbon sequestering. The builders love it because it's very quick to build with. And here I'm relating it to cross-laminated timber, which is a new building system that's kind of taken the world by storm. The markets are such that the functional tea market is going to expand by over 200% by 2030. The voluntary carbon markets, that is anybody's guess. There's all kinds of projections for that, but many of them point to a 20x increase in the market by 2030. And then the building materials, as I mentioned, we're comparing that to cross-laminated timber, which will have a 300% growth between 2023 and 2030. So, if there are high net worth individuals or grant makers on the call today, it's not just a humanitarian endeavor. We believe that these processes could scale to, be commercialized throughout the world and make that huge impact through the economic generation that would come from the mushrooms at first, but then go into these building materials that would be so advantageous to circular economy and developing a carbon neutral environment. So I'm going to leave it there. This is my email address, and also a way to reach out directly to MyCohab, which will also come directly to me. So you can reach me at either one of those email addresses, but Red House is my studio here in the United States, and MyCohab is the company that was again founded by Standard Bank. It's a nonprofit. It's based in Mauritius. That's mission is to promote these technologies throughout Africa to create as much impact as possible.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Chris. And I'm going to open the floor for questions. I'm going to just look at the questions in the chat box, and I'm going to start with Lucy's question. Christopher, would you be able to provide a rough idea of the cost to build this demonstration house, and is it possible to visit the house?
It's difficult to visit the house now. It's on private land, but yeah, I have loads and loads of pictures, and we have loads of video that we can share information on that. But yeah, we have concepts for we developed concepts for MyCohab called MyCohab in a Box, where we could basically do a demonstration project in just about any location. We are talking to some folks in South Africa right now about a couple different potential sites for that. And the idea there is to get to the demonstration level that we did did in Windhoek in a new location, and ideally get follow-on funding. So that's, roughly, $1.5 million US to set up a facility that would be a profitable mushroom farm and manufacturing center all in one. So you would have the mushroom farm that would pay for all of the operations there, and then the manufacturing would be enough to build a house or two possibly per year. But that's kind of at a demonstration level that would ideally scale up to the $15 million mark, where the economies of scale makes sense for a construction material manufacturing center. So yeah, there are different concepts, but demonstration levels, because the systems are vertically integrated, it's you get both the farm and the manufacturing in one, which is the way that the system works the best.
Great. Before I go on to the next question, I do have a question around both Jan and Chris. You spoke about the carbon credits that you could potentially generate from the processes that you follow. Is that an economically viable process? And if it is, and are you generating these credits already? And if you are, where can we find them? Jan, do you want to start?
Sure. No, yeah, I'll take the first one. We're still in the process of that. So the objective of the carbon credit side of things is to be able to actually fund the project. And so in our case, it's the biochar kiln, which at the same time is going to be producing clean electricity, because we'll actually capture the heat that's produced as a consequence of the biochar production. There are no emissions to this, because you actually trap all of those as well. And then you use that extra heat to turn a turbine, which generates electricity, replacing, in our case, ESCOM-based electricity for hopefully a commercial farm in the area that we're talking to. So what happens then is that you have certain companies around the world who are in themselves unable, for whatever reason, perhaps their industrial practices prevent it, unable to generate or to mitigate sufficient of their carbon footprint, and they then would forward buy some of the carbon credits, and in that fashion one funds the operation typically. That's a very general and broad answer, but that kind of gives you the idea.
And are they locally available? If I want to buy carbon credits, can I talk to you?
Yeah, this is a very big discussion to have. The carbon credit side of things is you actually get different entities that actually trade carbon credits on different stock exchanges. So or different exchanges, should I say. So for example, I know that they are available on the NASDAQ. So one has to sort of find out. You need to do research in that. We're not going down that road ourselves specifically. That's Science Africa's domain, really. Carla's going to correct me, I'm sure.
You want to add something, Carla?
I mean, since I'm Mrs. Vingerhoets, I just have to correct that Jan and I are not
sorry
related.
I realized that.
Nothing against you, Jan, but just for the record. Actually, what I wanted to say was, I don't know if we're going to put Ruan on the spot, Jan, but I see is in the audience. Maybe, Ruan, I don't know if you're still here, if you're in a position to answer Marlo's question about where it is currently available in South Africa.
Yeah, so there are several ways in which carbon credits are traded in South Africa and internationally. There's the voluntary carbon market and the compliance market. So with the compliance market, you can actually go onto the COAS system for the South African Registry, or the South African Department of Energy, I believe it is. But it is the COAS system, and there are carbon credits to offset tax liabilities, carbon tax liabilities. And those are all South African run projects, and then you can get a sense for the prices from there. Then the voluntary carbon market is entities like Vera, Gold Standard, Puro Earth, and several others. And those are ones in which you can purchase carbon credits to then offset your footprint at your own on a voluntary basis. And this is where the better prices are in regards to biochar specifically. And so that is where we are targeting for this specific lot of work, and the biochar financing as well. And those carbon credits will go onto the registry and get sold off of the registry, but the brokerage thereof is done between the project proponents, those who own the project, and then the buyers, and they communicate between themselves on what the offtake agreements are. Yeah, and prices can vary drastically. You can, on the Vera exchange, on the Vera registry, projects are typically around $10 per ton of carbon credit or ton of CO2 equivalence offset. Whereas for a biochar project, that can go up to $150 per ton of offset. And it's just because the implementation costs are so much more expensive for setting up a kiln versus just protecting an area of land. And so, yeah, that's kind of, I think, a quick rundown. Let me know if you have any specific questions.
Great, thanks. Chris, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so at MyCohab, we have laid the tracks basically for being on those registries. So we worked with a group called EverCity and the HBAR Foundation through Hedera, which has a blockchain-enabled certification of the actual carbon sequestration that we're doing. So it's very transparent, and people can kind of review that, make sure there's no double counting. And all of the project idea note and the methodologies were set up to be part of these registries that Ron was talking about. But as far as we're kind of waiting to scale the processes to launch that. But as far as the financial sense of that, it's more of a just a way of certifying or verifying the fact that our carbon accounting is what we say it is, because as he mentioned, you can get $10 per ton for the carbon credit, whereas we could potentially get $1,000 or $2,000 per ton for the building materials, and we can get up to $100,000 per ton for the mushrooms. And as I mentioned, you get 1 to 1 to 1 for that. If you get $10,000, $1,000, or $100,000, you're going to prioritize the sale of the mushrooms, but you're going to use that carbon accounting to prove to the people that you're selling the mushrooms to that you're actually doing that. So we're not looking to make money off of the carbon there. There's much better ways to get to the tonnage that you would need to actually make a profit in that. And I would say biochar is probably one of the best ways that you could get that high value, that high quantity, and sell that on the markets. But we're mostly looking at the carbon accounting of this as verification of sustainability claims that we're making.
I'm going to continue with the questions in the chat. There's the obvious fire question that we always get asked when we're talking about alternative building materials. So the question is, how resistant to fire are the mycelium blocks in relation to concrete?
I would say, kind of concrete is probably, a tougher one to compare against, but as a building material, they're very robust in fire resistance. And it's because even though the woody material that goes into this is flammable, and that's what makes it, not as great as concrete, because everything within concrete is non-combustible. The mycelium is self-extinguishing. So if something were to, if the material were to be set on fire by some other fuel that was causing that fire, the mycelium would actually extinguish it. The other aspect to that is a very thick material. And so building materials are rated in hours that it takes to burn from one space to another. And the thickness of that material is one of the things that gives it a very high hour rating. So, if there was one structure on fire, it's not going to spread to another structure very quickly because it's going to take a very long time to penetrate through that wall. And so we see that in mass timber too. So even wooden buildings that have very thick, columns and beams, they tend to do better in fire than steel structures, because steel, even though it's non-combustible, heats to a point where the metal starts to deflect, and then you get structural failure. So that they're very good in fire resistance, and the fact that they protect human beings and property, but they are not as non-combustible as concrete. So there's some caveats to that, but it performs well in fire resistance.
Right, Jan.
Yeah, I just wanted to, speaking from somebody who's built and owns a straw bale house. Obviously one of the tests we did way back 10 years ago was research and test, and it may be of interest to everyone that you cannot actually burn a straw bale if it's properly compressed. As Christopher mooted, it's so tightly compressed, it just burns out, because there's not enough oxygen for the propagation of flame to happen. And I can only imagine that with a mycelium block, under the pressures that these things are produced, it must be so much better. And the other thing, just about while we're on that quickly, is that the concrete actually does suffer in flame. If you have very high temperatures next to concrete or mortar, you actually do change the chemical characteristics or the materials characteristics of concrete. So my own argument for mycelium and straw bale building is it's very fire resistant, has great insulating properties, and it's very importantly flexible, which concrete is not, and bricks and mortar typically are not.
Thank you for that addition. Karen, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Hi, yes, thank you very much. So I'm a Namibian. I'm sitting in Namibia. And I'd like, hi Christopher.
Hello.
I'd like to ask you about those mica blocks, your sledgehammer test that we saw. It seemed that the block just bounced and actually didn't break. So somehow was it 6 MPa that that it tested to? It seems to be higher than that, and that it has an intrinsic tensile strength.
Yep.
So if one were to make a longer block, would you be able to bridge an opening?
Yes. So yeah, there's a few things there. So with the compressive strength that we're talking about, that's the forces acting downward on the block. So that's our gravity loads. What we were demonstrating with the sledgehammer test is a little bit more of an impact resistance. So, and yes, it did bounce. So it's very ductile is kind of the attribute that we would assign to that. And where that's important, is, well, if there's a psychopath with a sledgehammer trying to get into your building, I suppose that's important. But the more realistic scenario is in an earthquake or some kind of impact, like if a building was hit by a car or something like that. What you want the building to do is to be able to sway, to move back and forth and be a little bit flexible. With concrete, you don't get that flexibility, and of course the material is very heavy. So in earthquakes, when buildings sway and they pound up against each other, then you get that catastrophic damage that is deadly. And with timber and more ductile types of construction, the buildings are able to move and bend and not fall down. So you may get damage such that the building is irreparable at the end of the day, but the main thing is that you're going to preserve the human life, or the life within the structure, and so that people can get out of the building in time. But yeah, that doesn't happen when there's catastrophic failure. I think there was a second part to your question. Oh yes, so the being able to create units that could bridge openings, that can be done in the slab scenario that I was talking about as we scale this up with our blocks. If you unitize them, and we have built arches out of these as well, so you can basically get there are ways of spanning things, but it works. Those blocks really work in compression, so you have to kind of create a masonry arch to do that. But with the slab material, what we're looking at there would be involve fiber alignment of the system that would make it a little bit more like woody materials. And so, you know, wood beams are very capable of spanning things because they have that tensile bending strength. So we're working with different researchers to develop the slabs in a way that the cross lamination that happens and the fiber alignment of the compaction systems would be very similar to that cross laminated timber scenario.
Yes.
And yes, and not only could we like span openings, but we could have huge slabs of materials that could go up and become floor after floor of a high-rise construction. So yeah, we see the possibilities are just fantastic for not only the compressive strength in the materials, which we are getting already up to 26 megapascals, which is, you know, the strength of reinforced concrete with rebar and things in it, you know, and steel and woody materials. But we're, you know, looking at bending strengths that would be similar to timber or steel as well.
Yeah, you see, the product seems to be absolutely ideal for a low-cost housing scenario, because we've had cases where the shacks have been built very close to each other.
Yes.
Where the housing problem is, and when a fire does start,
yep,
it is so catastrophic. It just destroys entire housing areas.
Yes.
Within a very, very short period of time.
So
And
yeah.
just
The
that,
informal settlements, you have very thin walls, and so that's
yes.
one of the things I talked about with the thickness of the walls. It makes
Yes.
a huge difference.
And also that thermal insulation, your
Mhm.
R factor, because we actually deal with the heat. So we've
Yes.
had above 40 degrees Celsius here, and just that
That sounds
insulation.
good right now.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But insulation is incredible.
Yeah, so the structure that we made is on the campus where we have the factory and the cultivation, and most of the shipping containers that we're growing things out of, and the offices they all have air conditioning, but they also are kind of glass buildings. And the MyCohab is the only one that doesn't have air conditioning, but on those 40-degree days is the most comfortable building on the campus, and that's where all the workers will go for their break and spend time there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking at the time, I think we have to start wrapping up our conversation. I'm going to ask all three speakers to give us a final comment or a final message from you before I'm going to go and close up. Carla, you want to start?
I'm not so sure about a final comment, but I have a final request for Christopher, and that is, please, we need to talk. What
What
you're doing is great, and probably if it can work with encroacher bush in Namibia, it can work with invasive alien plants in the Overberg. So, yeah, I mean, in the background, the RSpace people have been sending messages backwards and forwards saying we need to talk to Christopher, we need to talk to Christopher. So please, we need to talk to Christopher.
Absolutely.
And yeah, thank you very much, Marlos, for this opportunity. And yeah, it was great. And I'm very glad that we did it and that we came across you, Christopher. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Great. Jan?
Yeah, I wanted to say again, thank you, Marloes, for bringing this all together and everybody who played a role in it. I'd like to quickly add that, you know, we're very much open to collaboration. If somebody from the built industry wants to chat to us about custom milling or something along those lines, we're very, very open to that. We're a small operation, but very flexible and agile, and we like to apply our imaginations to unique problems. So
amazing.
Thank you, everyone. Really, really appreciate that.
Great. Chris?
Yeah, I just want to say, thank you to the Regenerative Collaborative and for hosting this. And this has been a great conversation. I am really encouraged that that you're using words like regenerative. Not just sustainability, but regenerative, and to see the presentations from Carla and Jan about the focus on biodiversity and regeneration as well. So I'm really encouraged with the work that's being done in Southern Africa, and proud to be a small part of that with MyCohab, and hope to continue to engage with you folks and others as time goes on. So thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, let me wrap up. Next month we're gonna have a webinar which is open for registration already. I think Lisette has posted the link already to the registration, and we're going to talk about next generation hot water. We've got some interesting new technologies, PVT, and some older technologies, but often misunderstood technologies on the heat pump side. So we're going to unpack that next month. And then I just want to end off with saying a special thanks to our speakers and sharing your projects with the audience today. There is so much innovation in both presentations, and I'm so glad you guys will communicate afterwards, because I was thinking that during the presentations and it's like, okay, I can't force, but I think we need to collaborate here. It's amazing, and I'm glad you were able to share your stories here with us, and I hope something sparks and somebody comes with a great project and will ask for the materials that you guys are producing, or a great donor that can now really put some money to these great projects. And Carla and Jan, thank you for sponsoring the webinar. We really, really appreciate the funding, which goes directly to the CPD validation. So we really appreciate making this webinar possible. And then I'm going to punt a course that I'm going to do in March and April. If you want to learn anything about details about green buildings, how to design and promote green buildings, we have a 3-day course that's going to go from the basics to some of the technical details. So we're talking about, how to design for daylight, but also what kind of air conditioning systems are appropriate for green buildings. So if you're interested, the link is also on the chat, and reach out to me if you need a group booking. And then lastly, just follow us. Our request, as usual, follow us on our socials. It really helps us to show to potential sponsors that we have a great following. And with that, I'm going to say to everyone, thank you for attending. Thank you for being here, and follow us and join us next month again, and have a great evening, and see you next month.